Hey, this is David Owen.
And this is Marian Cowligowan.
And this is You Show Me Yours, a podcast where a married couple talks about the movies and television that they loved before the first date. And this time, I was made to watch Broadcast News.
Yep, it's the 1987 rom-com that made me realize, on this watching anyway, among other things, how bad everybody's hair was in the 80s. Ooh, boy. Like, I know everything looks dated 35 years later, but it was especially the hair. The clothes were like, okay, fine, whatever, but the hair was bad.
Mm.
And that's it. That's the only relevant thing.
Yep.
No social messages. None. Nope. No, of course. Even if there were none, you know that we would find them. This is sort of a workplace-based rom-com with a love triangle. It's a rom-com where, spoiler, nobody ends up with anybody, which I feel like makes it a little bit unique. Our triangle is Holly Hunter playing Jane, who is a network news producer, Albert Brooks playing Aaron, who is a reporter, and William Hurt playing Tom, who is a reporter who's kind of on the fast track to being an anchor, mostly because he is attractive. Mm-hmm. He is also dumb as a box of rocks. Aaron, on the other hand, is, I would say, not conventionally attractive. He's not hideous, but he's not like a golden boy like Tom is, but he's also incredibly smart and good at his job. And so here we have Jane is at various points torn between sort of the yin and the yang. I first saw this in a journalism class in college 25 years ago. And I remember at the end being furious because essentially, like, we'll jump to the end here. Tom, the dumb golden boy, has made what Jane considers an egregious breach of ethics and is rewarded for it and keeps going on up the ladder and gets bigger and bigger jobs. And nobody ends up with anybody. And it's all very sad. And I remember being really angry about it. And now I'm watching this and I'm like, I don't know. It's just how it is.
Yeah, no, I didn't think it was sad.
So, I mean, everybody has somebody at the end and they all seem to be fairly fulfilled and they've moved past the anger that they had at the end of our, of the story that we're told. So I don't really remember why I was so angry about this. And I honestly don't think that anybody else in my class understood why I was so angry either. I remember just the movie was over and our professor was like, well, what do you think? And I was just mad and everybody kind of looked at me like, oh, okay. Yeah. To be fair, though, it was a class called Gender and Journalism. So you kind of, I don't know, being angry about a movie seems to make sense in that class. But also looking at this now, I don't see any particular gender-based politics, so I don't know why she chose this movie. Maybe she just needed something to fill class time. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a look at a time when those sorts of divisions were kind of still there between. I mean, I still can't think of like a big name female news presenter even to this day, but where women were kind of corralled into these specific roles. And during the course of the movie, it's, Jane at least is kind of breaking a ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Wait, hang on. You can't think of any major female newscasters?
No. News presenters.
You're not British. Okay, explain to me what that
I don't
means.
know what do you call like the guy that does the 6:30 news?
An anchor.
Yeah. Okay.
So Connie Chung, Katie Couric.
No. I mean Walter Cronkite. I mean like the guy, the person that comes into your house on the marquee program and presents the news of the world. Right?
Connie Chung, Katie Couric,
but
Diane Sawyer.
So, okay, yes, Katie Couric did one of the nightly newses for a little while.
Yeah.
But it was largely a bomb, right?
Was it? I don't know.
I mean, I feel like she got run out of town. Okay, yeah, you're right. I'm just saying, like, there aren't any, like, who's the female Peter Jennings?
Katie Couric.
Peter Jennings was on the air for like 30 years. I'm saying like
Barbara Walters, Elizabeth Vargas.
I'm looking. I guess I'm just not conveying this correctly. I'm looking for there was a time where people, the success of your nightly news program, your non-local, your national nightly news program,
Sure,
rested on whether or not people trusted in the person that you were putting forward, and that person effectively became a figurehead for your entire news division.
Oh, well.
And I can't, like, who was the guy that didn't really, like, Williams didn't work out that great recently. Who was the other guy? The one that took over
I don't
Lester
know.
something?
Lester Holt? Oh, Lester Holt is a treasure.
Yeah, but
First of all, he's far more attractive
Sure.
than anybody named Lester has a right to be. And also, he's from Chicago, so I feel like I knew him because I watched him on the news growing up. Anyway,
yeah, and maybe I'm just thinking of something that doesn't exist anymore.
I think that's
In that
part
sort
of it,
of, yeah,
yes.
like I'm thinking Walter Cronkite,
Yeah.
Dan Rather. Like I'm thinking of like those are a singular person in whom the trust of the entire news division is placed, and they are held up as a figurehead in the way that Bill is in this movie.
okay. That's I see where you're going with this.
Like the one that runs the place, the face that runs the place, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I see your point. And I don't think that exists anymore because people have so many places to get their news, and not just sources like networks, but websites, not newspapers anymore, but actual sources, and then times of day on one station. Like you can
Right.
say, "Oh, I get my news from NBC," but what you really mean is the morning news, the local news that comes on at 4:30 a.m. Like that's not the same as the official network. Anyway,
Yeah.
So that's a splintered audience. So there's no one person that everybody trusts anymore, and people in general don't trust the media implicitly the way that they did 60 years ago.
Yeah.
But I see your point. Tom is being elevated to, if there were a Cronkite in 1987, where Tom is being elevated to is the Cronkite level.
Yeah, and I guess
we are shown that he doesn't really. The movie tells us he doesn't exactly deserve it. Well, and that's a question. I think is that how bad is that breach of ethics?
Well, I don't even think that. I think the end of the movie seems to indicate that he's earned it. We can talk about that whenever, like at some point. We don't have to stop and divert into that right now.
Well, okay. Why do you think that?
So, what is your reading of the end of the movie? So, just to get everybody up to speed,
yeah.
You know, these three come together. They work in this newsroom. There are layoffs. Drama ensues.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron fails at being an anchor. Tom gets elevated and starts grabbing some attention. And Jane is caught between them. Then eventually there are layoffs, and they all kind of go their separate ways. And the love triangle fizzles.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically between Jane and Tom when she finds out that Tom staged something for a news story, and that is ethically unacceptable to her, and he goes off, and then epilogue.
Yeah, 7 years later.
Yeah, and
he's speaking at a conference and says, you know, when they asked me to take over as the New York anchor, which is like the Cronkite position
for the Bill with Jack Nicholson's
right.
Bill.
I said I would on one condition, that I didn't have to be managing editor, which I think if you are not a news person, that just goes over your head. But it means he just got to deliver the news. Yep. He didn't have to write it or report it or do any of that, which is, you know, he kind of created a job that he was suited for and farmed out the other stuff, it turns out, to Jane. Yeah. Which is what he tells her very early on when he meets her, is that I don't understand any of this stuff that I'm saying. I'm a pretty face and I read the copy and that's it. So yeah, he's kind of abdicating some of the Cronkite-esque responsibilities, but he's doing the stuff well that he does well and finding someone else to do the other stuff.
Right. And so what is your read on the end of it? Do you, like you were just saying whether he deserves it or not in the end?
Well, it depends on.
Let me tell you my read on it.
Okay.
Okay. So you can see where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So the final confrontation between Jane and Tom, she, reads in the riot act about, he's trying to excuse it by saying, well, I almost cried anyway, and maybe would have. And if there had been a camera there, it would have caught me doing it. But because we only had one camera and I didn't actually cry, and, and someone during the interview says it would have been great if we could have got that. And he's like, hold on a second. And he produces tears. He's like, it's not really lying. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I almost cried anyway. And this made the story so much more effective by doing it. But Jane objects to that because it didn't happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I'm sure there's been a news anchor that ended it with, and that's the way it happened or whatever, but that's what you're supposed to do with the hard news. You're not, It's not sensationalized. It doesn't matter if you almost cried and you didn't catch that on camera. That would have been great if you had a reverse shot of you, but you didn't. And now you can't fake it because faking it is emotionally manipulating the audience to potentially find a story more moving, to change minds and hearts, and in a way that isn't true, that you've sold something.
It's editorializing in a way.
Yeah, effectively.
Yeah.
And he doesn't quite get that. And he goes off on a vacation that they had planned to do together. And then 7 years later. So to me, I took it when he is giving his speech and he is saying that he's not abdicating those responsibilities for selfish reasons or because he thinks he can't hack it. He's doing it because he understands that there are better people than him to do that job. And he knows someone who is way better than him for that, specifically Jane. I think he comes back to Jane because he knows she has the ethical center that will keep him on the straight and narrow, which he has, and this is a lot of inference, I am inferring, been trying to do since that conversation at the airport where she read him the riot act. That on some level, and this is maybe not explicitly evidenced in the movie, I think the evidence supporting it is the fact that Jane is willing to work with him again. But that's my read on it, that he made strides for the 7 years that he was in London or wherever else, waiting for the anchor job to open, the main anchor job to open, and is now in the place that he should have been in ethically when he did that first story and faked the crying, as evidenced by the fact that she's even willing to work with him at all. Because to me, the Jane that is giving him the business at the airport would not work with the man that left the airport. She would only work with the man that's been doing a penance for 7 years and improving his ethics and understanding why she was right. And it would have been, you could have tied that up with a bow if he just said, you were right. Or in his speech, he could have said, someone gave me some good advice, or whatever. Like, you could have tied it up with a bow. So it's left ambiguous. And that's why I read so much into it. And that's just, it's just all me reading little signs. But that's what I took away. Like, my headcanon of this movie, he learned his lesson, and she is only now willing to work with him because he learned his lesson.
That's possible, but yeah, I think you are doing a lot of work to get that out of there. I think if that were what we were meant to think, then we would see a little bit more of it.
Well,
but I like that version. I hope that's what happened.
Well, so then my question is, does the Jane that's in the airport come back to be his managing editor 7 years later? If he hasn't demonstrated his change.
I don't know, 7 years is a long time. You mellow and you run up against ethical dilemmas all the time, and you learn that sometimes you can't be strictly by the ethics book all the time.
Yeah, and that's
I don't know.
That's a reading also not supported by anything we see in the movie. So that's the beautiful thing about a fairly ambiguous ending like that. They didn't say yes to any particular thing. They didn't say no. Like, if you just go on the hard facts, all we know is she agreed to be his managing editor and he's taking over the main anchor job. We don't know one way or the other if he straightened up or if she loosened up.
Yeah. One thing I noticed here, so at the beginning, so Tom and Jane first meet when she's giving a speech at this journalist convention, coincidentally the same one where Tom is giving the speech at the end. That was a nice bookend.
Yeah.
The National Association of Local Journalists or whatever. And he's in the audience and he's with a woman, and then at the end he's got his fiance with him and he bizarrely introduces her during his speech. I was like, nobody cares. That's really weird. But I wonder, is that the same woman?
It looks like the same woman, yeah.
So that's an interesting...
Or he has a type.
Yeah.
You know,
which
and Jane is very
possible.
Explicitly
Not
against his type. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I need to go back and check, because if it's the same woman,
that's pretty...
That seems like no growth there.
And in that scene where we see him in the audience, that woman has her hand on his thigh.
The inside of his thigh.
The inner thigh.
Yeah.
So clearly... And I think this movie does this thing. They do a ton, like one of my favorite comedies of all time is Not Another Teen Movie, because it does all of this ADR, this like voiceover that doesn't happen in the scene on the set on the day, right?
Yeah.
They come back in and they put little things in like, oh no, she didn't, or whatever. This movie has a ton of ADR, just little stuff that is just dropped in, and no one's saying it.
Just like background jokes.
Yeah, and some of them are like, but when right before the camera cuts to the two of them in the audience, this being Tom and the mystery woman with the hand on the thigh, a female voice says, "Where are we going to have dinner after?"
Yeah.
Or something to that exact effect. You know, maybe not those exact words, but that exact thing. Like, where are we going for dinner?
Very clearly. So it wasn't like just mutter.
And like the language of cinema, because they're immediately switching to that, makes me think it was that woman saying it to him. You know, yeah. And like after that conference, he ends up with Jane and ends up back at her hotel room at some point. Like there is a wonderful version of this movie where he has this fiance the whole time.
Well, yeah.
And is just doing all this stuff.
Yeah, and she has no idea about any of this, and he's sleeping with one woman and about to sleep with another, and he's great. Yeah, no, I thought that too.
It's
like
great.
He's really kind of a schmuck. He's got professional ethical lapses, depending on your interpretation, and he's cheating. Yeah, I don't know what I think about that.
Yeah. And like some of the stuff I was talking about that ADR thing, because I did want to bring it up. There's just little stuff like at the end, and there's the scene. The final scene takes place in this gazebo, and as Tom is walking away to go off to whatever, Aaron is there and has his son with him, who is like 5 or 6 years old. The kid runs off as Tom leaves and then comes back. And when the kid comes back, he sits down just out of frame. And as he sits down out of frame, there is a child voiceover that says, "Daddy." Like, you know, and it's just like low, and it's not intrusive at all. Like it doesn't intrude on the scene. It's just, and the movie's full of that. And I just kept noticing it over and over. Yeah. And it just kept making me think of like, this is like Not Another Teen Movie, except in that movie, all of those are like little jokes.
Yeah.
You know, little stingers or whatever that just add, they're just short little nothing throwaway lines that are just a quick giggle. And in this movie, I just kept noticing it over and over and over. I was
random
like,
lines.
Like they just keep throwing it in. It was crazy. Just, you know, I'm no filmmaker, but I'm so into movies that I have often pretended to be in my own head. And this was just one of those things where that little part of me that pretends to know, to be a film snob or know about movie making, which is like, they keep doing it. They keep doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
at a certain point, I was kind of giggling at them, even though they weren't intended to be jokes, just because they kept popping up so often.
Well, there's no Wilhelm scream though. So.
Yes, luckily.
What was I gonna?
But yeah, we were. I guess were we done with the ending kind of talk?
Kinda, yeah. Well, I think it goes back to, yeah. I mean, through the whole. So there's this sort of prologue where we're shown childhood scenes with all three of these people, and Tom is shown from the beginning to be like so good looking, and like apparently older women are like predatory about
Almost, yeah,
him,
like-
kind of, and he's dumb. Not doesn't do well in school. How about that?
Yeah.
Let's say that.
Season D's.
And knows it, and he kind of says, "What are you supposed to do in life when you got a pretty face and nothing else?" And then the Chiron is like, "Future TV news anchor." So like from the beginning, we've cast him as a pretty face and not much else. Aaron is sort of insufferably smart. He graduates high school 2 years early and is the valedictorian, and loves reminding everybody that he's going to do great things and they're stupid.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, yes, I see that in adult Aaron too. And Jane is extremely high strung and verbose from the beginning, essentially. But yeah, I think from the beginning, Tom is forecast as he's the face of things, and Aaron and Jane are the brains, which is not an entirely bad place to be. I mean, I think of myself as I'm a brain, meaning like all my jobs have been behind the scenes and nobody notices what I do until I screw up.
Yeah.
But it is certainly a little less rewarding when your face is not on the billboard and people don't notice you in public and say, "Oh, hi, loved your show the other day."
Yeah. It's that sort of thing of, it's the songwriter that eventually just wants to sing their own stuff. It's like you look at all the songs that like Willie Nelson wrote for people, or a lot of these other people that were like, oh, like they were writing all these songs and then finally they got to do their own thing. Or like for me, it's the relationship between Jane and Tom is very much reminds, because everything reminds me of wrestling in one way or another. In wrestling, there are guys who are great workers, air quotes workers, meaning great in the ring, but they can't talk. So they often will put that guy who is great in the ring with a manager or a secondary person who can talk. So that person, so then it's this collaboration of each of them showing their particular skill off. And with Jane and Tom, I think it's the same way. Like for a lot of this movie, they treat Tom like an idiot, but then there's an opportunity for Tom to mentor, like coach Aaron on news presenting. And you see that like when it comes to that, he's got it.
Great
he's
at that.
great at he's like he knows every little trick and little tip and things that Aaron isn't even thinking about. Aaron is, and again, like the guy who can get in the ring and do the moves, but he doesn't save those moves for a place that's going to make the audience invest in his character. Just because you can do this cool thing doesn't mean you should do it all the time, every match. Just because you can write a wonderful piece, if you can't read it with an effect that's gonna touch people, an affect that's going to touch people, then there's no point. Right. Like that. And that's, you see Tom in that moment, you see like he does have a skill set. It's just different than these other two people. And he's not actually dumb, quote unquote, in a traditional sense, perhaps, but not in an intellectual sense, but not overall. Just like when you see, if I watch a plumber or an electrician do something, I feel like an idiot. But if any of those guys watched me, work on networking equipment, they would be like, oh, wow. Like everybody's got their own skill.
Oh yeah. And even within your particular field, like I'm a much better editor than I am a writer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think though, so the anchor gets all the recognition.
Yes.
And I don't know. I never have done anything in broadcast, but I feel like in a lot of news organizations, there is this sense that you have to pay your dues. And if you get to the anchor position or in a newspaper, like you're a columnist or whatever, You have to have done kind of the behind the scenes thankless grunt work. And then you get the big shiny chair where everybody recognizes you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's this sense that Tom skipped all that stuff. Didn't have to be in the, in the jungle with the Sandinistas or whatever the heck that was.
Well, Tom represents this new breed of news anchor that is looks and no substance. He is not like you said, Walter Cronkite or Peter Jennings or whatever. Like he's not the guy who's also out there doing the reporting.
Yeah.
He is just there to present the news, to the camera and do it well. And he does it well when he's given that chance. And you see, like, one of the things that was that early on a hint that Tom actually is skillful. And I don't know if you've ever had to do this, but when you are trying to talk with someone talking in your ear, it is the most complicated set of things to ever have to do.
Oh yeah, no, I couldn't do that. Yeah, they have this breaking news, and they have this sort of hastily put together breaking news broadcast, and Jane is producing, and so she tells Tom everything of what to do through the earpiece, but in some cases she's telling him what to do while he's talking. And I was watching it this time going, my brain would short circuit. I could not do that at all.
And she's feeding him factoids, and he's seamlessly integrating them in, like she's feeding it to him at the beginning of a sentence he started, and he's including them by the end of that sentence. And he's never repeating her verbatim.
Right.
He's always paraphrasing what she said, to put it within the flow of what he's doing. So like when you actually watch, and so I'm glad that within the context of the movie, Aaron gets to have that revelation that this guy actually is good at what he does.
Yeah.
And Aaron suddenly realizes that like he can go with the, Grenada rebels and do a piece in the field, and it's not like what they do when they're in the big time, news anchor spot.
Well, and he has that realization too. He says, when you're anchoring, you're just talking to other people who have been out reporting these stories. And that's the thing I like doing anyway.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good realization for people to have. And I'm sure this happens no matter what your industry is. You think, oh, I want the big fancy thing that gets all the attention. And you think, wait, hang on, I'm in this specialty for a reason, because this is what I'm good at and this is what I like. And it would be nice to get this attention, but I'm going to do what I'm good at. We haven't said, by the way, the thing we talked about. Aaron realizes that Tom has the strength, and part of the reason that he does is that he has his shot at anchoring.
Yes,
and it goes so terribly wrong.
Yeah, like it's the most explicitly comedic thing in this movie. Speaking of it, this is a James L. Brooks movie, so like this is, if you know him from nothing else, you know him from producing a gajillion seasons of The Simpsons and writing on The Simpsons and stuff, like, and other stuff like Rhoda and Taxi. And,
I think Family Ties and lots of.
He had a hand in 75% of the sitcoms throughout the 70s and 80s and movies, and but if you know him from nothing else, you know him from The Simpsons. Yeah. So, a guy who has comedic chops. This is like an explicitly
and Albert Brooks comedic part. Too.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh no,
Brooks his is very dry and subtle, but he's very good. And it's the evening Saturday news, so kind of low stakes. And was it at 11 o'clock?
Yeah, it was night. Yeah, it was
super, which I didn't. Networks don't do that now, but anyway. Yeah. And it starts out. You think it's going to go well. He's gotten some tips from Tom on how to do stuff, and you can
see that he's following them. He sits on his jacket, which is a Tom tip.
Yeah, carefully chooses what suit and tie and stuff, and he's got water by him in case his mouth goes dry. And he's written his script, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, this is really good." Blah 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 blah. And then he just starts to sweat. I mean, rivers.
Yeah, like comedic flop sweat
within seconds. And apparently this is based on a real happening.
Right.
I don't have the IMDb thing in front of me, but apparently when they were planning this movie, Albert Brooks turned on CNN and some reporter was sweating profusely, and he called James L. Brooks and was like, Aaron needs to sweat. And because at the time they were just like, something goes wrong with Aaron's broadcast. And Albert Brooks was like, it's going to be sweat. And I mean,
got it. Yeah,
his whole face. At one point he opens his jacket and he's got there's sweat, not just sweat on his underarms, all up down his shirt and his collar and everything. And he tells Jane later that people called in concerned because they thought he might be having a heart attack on air. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's just so.
And
Yeah.
the movie explicitly references like the other most famous
Yes.
sweat on television incident, which was Nixon in the debate with Kennedy,
Yes.
where he just, had a similar sweating situation and people effectively found him untrustworthy because he was sweating like a pig.
If you don't know the story, the 1960 presidential debate was, I believe, the first one to be televised. And people who listened to it on the radio thought that Nixon had won. People who watched it on TV thought that Kennedy had won, because Kennedy was cool, and I think he wore makeup, and Nixon refused
didn't
to
want powder
and
whatever,
the sweat. So
it was all shiny.
More for the people who are conspiracy theorists about how Kennedy didn't deserve to win the TV advantage and his father buying a zillion votes. What I noticed after that, though, is in Aaron's living room, there's a framed picture of Mr. and Mrs. Nixon on the wall, which I was like, why? Why would anybody in 1987 have a framed picture of Nixon who resigned in disgrace?
Right.
Let alone this character who does not seem to be a Nixon fan. I if there's a type of Nixon fan, that doesn't seem, but anyway, but so he has this realization of like, well, this was really terrible, and maybe this is not my strength.
And he's already been told by his boss, like, hey, if someone tries to headhunt you, like, you should take it.
Yeah. And he's had this realization of like, I like doing the other stuff better anyway.
Yeah. After the fact. So that when the layoffs actually do happen, he is preserved because he's cheap to keep on and he's a dependable hand.
Yeah.
But ends up quitting anyway because he has that realization that, he's not. The only thing for him to do at the network is continue to persevere and maybe one day become an anchor. But he would rather be in a local market telling real stories than here.
And his boss, who is played by the same actor as Shannon Christie's dad in Far and Away, which is delightful. I didn't remember that at all. His boss says, "I'm so proud of him." It's great because his boss is getting fired too. Yeah. So there's I would not have appreciated this part when I first saw this at age 22 or whatever I was. They have this massive layoff in the newsroom, and Jane survives and Tom survives. And she says to him, "This feels so bad. It's like a physical pain." And I can so relate to that because I've been through a couple of layoffs at various places. I survived some of them. One I did not. It doesn't feel good no matter which side of the cleaver you come down on. It feels worse if you get laid off, but it feels really bad if you survive too, because you're saying bye to all these people that you've enjoyed working with, who you will miss in a professional way. I mean, just like your work is harder because there's fewer people there and personally, and then you just feel, ugh. So that whoever wrote that line has experienced a layoff, because that just really hit me there.
Oh yeah.
But I appreciate, like I said, I've never worked in a TV newsroom, but I appreciate the little things like that really add to the feeling of what a workplace is like. Early on, Jane is putting a piece together with the character actor is named Christian Clemenson, and now I know who he is. I see him in everything.
Oh yeah. The editor guy that's scrubbing the tape. Yeah.
And she's putting this stuff together, and like I've never seen this in progress, but she's got like 15 minutes, and she's like, "Oh, hang on, we're gonna get this book from my office and take an image of this and did it and doing this, and he messes something up, and she's just standing there going, Bobby, like, get back on track. And but everybody knows her and they know how she is, and it all works together. And then Joan Cusack has to run hellbent for leather down the hall to get the tape to the people in time, and blah blah blah, and it's fantastic. We need more Joan Cusack in everything, by the way.
Yeah, and this was a particular time for her.
Yes.
When she had, like, you cast her in movies because you needed this sort of ditzy Valley Girl almost type, and she would continue to ride that for a few more years before like kind of bucking that and maturing out of that, and still, having good comedic chops, but but no longer depending on that sort of like, big hair, flaky, like it's the thing. I don't know if they had a name, but like in the 80s when someone would wear a sweatshirt that went down to like their mid thigh with leggings. Like,
I think that's just the 80s.
I know. Yeah. I don't know if like I said, I don't know if it had a name, but like that's how I always envision her, like with a scrunchie and big hair and lipstick that's too red and a 3/4 length sleeve sweater that goes 3/4 lengths down her legs as well. And I'm just like, it's almost this like Valley Girl meets like New Jersey.
Yeah.
Sort of. I don't even know. Like,
I don't know. I think that's just the 80s though.
It is, but but it's like, it's just, that's how she is in my head every time I think of like her in the 80s or whatever.
And big curls. And,
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And her character in Working Girl, which we also talked about umpteen episodes ago, is like an amped up version of this character. It's great. But yeah, we need Joan Cusack in everything, basically.
Yeah, we were 100%. But we were talking about Albert Brooks before. I just wanted to bring up my favorite Albert Brooks trivia.
Okay.
Do you know his birth name?
Yes, because I looked it up. Yes.
Yeah, and I knew this. I also saw it looking it up, but I knew this as like a factoid years ago.
Yeah.
And I used to bring it up a lot. Yeah, he was born Albert L. Einstein.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And he naturally changed his name.
Yes.
But also that leads, like, a lot of people assume that any of the Brooks, that all of these comedic Brooks are related. Yeah, Mel and James L. and Albert, and none of them are related.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always thought that was a great Albert Brooks piece of trivia. Born Albert Einstein.
I love it.
And I think he has a joke about it of like, he changed his name to that to sound smarter.
He was originally Albert Brooks, and then he added Einstein.
But that's my favorite piece of trivia.
I was looking up any factoids about this, and I came across an interesting piece about this that says Aaron he's one of the early examples of a nice guy on film. He has been Aaron and Jane have both been at the network for, a long time. We don't know how long. He is, I don't know, 10 years older than she is, and she's in her mid 20s. So whatever, do the math there. Mid to late 20s. And he's clearly in love with her.
Yes.
And they're besties and they hang out all the time, and she does not seem to have any interest in him.
Although he is 100% her type as far as he's smart and like he's everything that she would probably tell you she wants in a man.
Well, except sometimes, like, I don't know, it's like ends of a battery. The two positive ends, they just won't.
No, I know. I'm saying like they may be too alike.
Yes.
But I'm saying if she were to sit down and say, these are the things that we want in a man. You're like, a man who can challenge me in conversation, a man who will this, like
who's good at his job, like, blah, blah, blah.
Ethics and, like everything she would say she wants in a man. He is, but like that's that doesn't always work out.
No, but he's clearly
that rarely works out. Probably
he's clearly in love with her. And this review said, or it wasn't a review, an essay, I guess, whatever. It said essentially the nice guy thinks that because he loves this woman and she laughs at his jokes, therefore he deserves to be loved back. And a lot of movies reward that character for that.
Yeah.
Like, I see now Tom doesn't have any ethics and I love you instead. And it doesn't have to be, it's not a zero sum thing. Like sometimes to quote Kelly Taylor in Beverly Hills 90210, I choose me. I don't choose either of you.
Right.
Which is kind of what Jane does here.
Yeah.
Now, granted, she has this, she goes to see Aaron the night of his awful anchor attempt, and she doesn't know how it went, and he told her because she was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner with Tom. Cracks me up, by the way. At this point now in 2023, the Correspondents' Dinner is a thing, and it's televised, and everybody. But at the time, it was probably just this arcane little
this, like,
thing.
Insider thing.
Yeah. So she hasn't seen the broadcast, of course, because the internet's not a thing yet. At one point, Tom is like, I taped it. And I've watched it.
Tom's already seen it. Yeah. He's taped it.
His glee is a little bit unseemly. Like, that's That's not okay.
Yeah.
But Aaron can tell that that Jane is falling for Tom, and he just kind of blows up at her and is like, "This guy's terrible, and I'm in love with you," and blah, 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 blah. And so they have this. They part on bad terms. So that's part of the reason why she doesn't go back to him. But I think another movie would still have her say, "I'm sorry, I just got so angry because I couldn't face my own feelings, and I love you too," and da 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 da. And this does not do that.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of remarkable that a movie from the 80s didn't do any of that. Like it portrayed a strong female character who is unapologetic in her actions, has a lot of like typically male traits. Thinks she's always right. Tells the cabbies how to get where they're going.
Yeah.
But is in the end, she doesn't. She effectively chooses herself, like you said. She chooses her career. She could have gone on the vacation with Tom and maybe followed him to London or tried to maintain some long distance relationship with him as he became the correspondent in London. But she chooses herself. She presumably, puts her head down and does a good job in her role, or her new role in the DC office.
And did you notice at the end? So, Tom wants Jane to be his managing editor on the network newscast, and he says, "Oh, I thought you'd want to stay in DC." When she tells him, "Yes, I'll do it," and she says, "Well, there is a guy, but he says he'll fly up on the weekends. Like the guy's going to fly to her."
Right. Yeah.
And I thought, that's a good guy. He's not expecting you to fly back.
Although she does kind of show some growth, I think, as a character. At the end, when they're going into the fade out, she says that the new guy is into boating, and she's taken him. He's taken her skiing.
Yeah,
and Aaron is, having been her good friend for such a long time, is like, flabbergasted by this, the idea of her skiing. So, she's hinting at a little bit of growth on her part, but not negative growth. Not like, I'm doing this because, a man wants me to do it. It's more of like, she's actually opening herself up to understand that like maybe her perfect partner isn't going to be this carbon copy of herself, because that's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, or I think before I used the example of batteries, it's like two sides of a Velcro strip.
Yeah.
The two that are the same will not stick together. You need the opposite sides.
And sometimes your spouse takes you to a figure 8 destruction derby at a state fair, and you love it.
I did. That was pretty awesome.
Yes.
When are we going again? It's been, a good 15 years. We got to do it again.
I talk about that frequently to people.
Do you really?
Yeah. Just like to put it in context of like, if there's a conversation about, being interested in your spouse's interests or them getting interested in your stuff, or specifically when someone's like, there was a guy at work not too long ago, and he's from around here, being the South. And he was dating a woman from like, California or something. And I was like, like people from outside of our culture don't necessarily think that they'll like stuff, but like take her to her first, like, take her frog gigging, or take her to her first like turkey shoot, or figure 8 destruction derby on a dirt track at a county fair.
That was pretty great. Yeah.
You may be able, you may find that she has an interest in some of the.
Well, we say an interest. I've never seen it again.
We've never been back, right?
But it was fun.
Next, it's going to be a monster truck rally. So we'll take you to.
At this point, though, I might need ear protection.
You definitely.
When we went the first time, I was young and stupid, and now I do things like put sunscreen on my ears.
Yeah.
And take antacids.
Yeah, you'll definitely need ear protection, especially if Truckosaurus is there.
Truckosaurus? What?
Yeah, you don't know about Truckosaurus?
No.
See, this is the thing. Growing up in the South, there was a monster truck rally every month almost.
Yeah.
Like there were a couple of touring things, and there were other things.
We had them I feel like we had them where I grew up too. I just remember the TV ads. They were always Sunday.
Well, yeah, like, and it was always like, All your favorites will be there. Bigfoot, Barefoot, the Carolina Crusher. With a special appearance from Truckosaurus. Truckosaurus. And Truckosaurus is this 30-foot tall, like, scrap metal contraption that looks like a dinosaur.
Yeah.
That's made to look like a transformer dinosaur. And its whole gimmick is that it has, like, 2 hydraulic arms that reach down and pick up cars. And then he holds the cars up and fire spits out of his mouth onto the cars and then he drops them. And that's Truckosaurus. That's what Truckosaurus does.
That sounds amazing.
It is pretty great. I saw Truckosaurus probably 2 or 3 times as a kid.
Oh my God.
And it was worth it every time. It was great.
Well, and at this point now, when our kid was, I don't know, 3, he was very into this thing on Netflix that was a bunch of shorts about Mater from Cars.
Yes.
And there was one where it was half wrestling, half monster truck rally. And so there were, Mater was a big monster truck type thing. So I'm imagining that. And I think, there were some trucks that spit fire and did other things.
Oh, it's
so
great.
I'm gonna
You go to the monster truck rally. There's gonna be either Truckosaurus or a stunt show. Like the most common stunt I used to see, and they would do these at the races and stuff. Where I grew up, there's this famous, really short track, like incredibly short. I don't even know how long it is, but it's incredibly short. It's called Bowman Gray Stadium, Bowman Gray Speedway. There was a brief reality show about people who raced at Bowman Gray. Actually, it's this super short track that people race around. But you'd go there and they would have a stunt man there, and they would do the same stunt man stuff at monster truck rallies sometimes. But the stunt that I most often saw was the guy would pull a plywood box out into the middle of the arena and then just get in it, and it would blow up. And then he would come out of it like still smoking from the explosion and give a thumbs up. And that was the stunt. That was the whole stunt.
Oh dear.
But yeah, you'd have that, the guy getting blown up in the plywood coffin, Truckosaurus, or some random like motocross thing where motocross bikes would just jump on the ramps and stuff that were for the monster trucks.
Oh,
yeah, it was a whole thing. Like we probably only went to 4 or 5 of these things throughout my childhood, but yeah, it was an event every time. It was great. And sometimes they were inside. Those are the best ones. I watched one inside the Greensboro Coliseum one time. Like, those were the best ones because that sound just echoes throughout the whole place.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah.
And also as a kid, I was just fascinated by the fact that they brought a bunch of dirt inside the place to make these ramps and stuff. I was equally fascinated the first time I ever went to an indoor hockey game. It was like, they put ice in the arena? What?
We can do it in our house too. Yeah.
Why isn't this what my room looks like?
All that to say, yes, you need a partner who is the opposite side of the Velcro strip.
Yes,
sometimes.
The hook and loop doesn't fasten if you've got the same 2 sides.
Yeah. Well, that is one of my questions. I don't see Jane and Aaron working very well, except under very specific. I don't know, like their chances of success. I don't think, even if let's say she does realize, oh my gosh, I love you too. I don't see that working long term because they're both so specific about the way they want everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. I think it, the like a lot of people think that they want somebody like, oh, if they play video games or they like skeet shooting or ultimate frisbee, they think they want a partner that does that.
Mm-hmm.
But you almost never do.
No, because then you can never turn off work.
Right.
And often
if it's your job,
you need to be able to turn it off. Yes, you
can never turn it off. Yeah, and both of the relationships I think are doomed for that reason. Like you need, you need your like, oh, I'm a record-setting free diver.
Mm-hmm.
I dive down without a mask or anything, 100 yards under the ocean or whatever. You need your spouse to be like an executive at Walmart or something. Like you need someone who is so far away from what you do. And when it comes to like hobbies or interests, like sure, some of those can be the same, but yeah, especially the thing which you use to define your life. I'm a bike rider. I drive a Jeep. I don't know, whatever you use to define who you are. Like you always think you want someone who is like that, but you almost never do. And I think it's the same way with work.
Yeah.
Like you think, it'd be so much more convenient if I just work with my spouse. Like, no.
That's interesting that you say that, because I was just thinking of people that I know who work, or at one point worked with their spouses. I have mentioned other times I worked on a newspaper copy desk for about 5 years, and that's nights and weekends, and most of us were transplants, so we didn't have much of a life outside of work when we moved there, and then never had a chance to develop one. So the dating was pretty incestuous. There were a lot of interdesk couples, and several marriages came out of that. But it occurs to me, I'm thinking through the couples, I don't think that all of them would have considered work the thing that their life revolves around.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it. Like, you worked together, but you had other stuff in your life. So that's an interesting
I do think that's the thing. Like, the thing that I feel like I've learned from however many years of marriage it's been at this point is that, you need space to be an individual. I think there are some people who might look at the setup that we have right now and think that, like, these people never do anything together, but we do. We just went out last night with some friends. But I think the fact that we each have our space to do the things that we are passionate about or enjoy the most, without having to compromise those to involve the other person. Like, if you and I wanted to read together and read the same book, you were a voracious reader, you would on occasion have to read a book that I'm interested in, that you are far less interested in. And at that point, like, I am somehow poisoning your hobby that you enjoy. A lot of couples watch television together. Like, it's difficult to agree on a show that you both actually want to watch sometimes. It's often that one couple wants it much more than the other. Like, The Last of Us, we need to watch that.
I told you I would watch it, and then you were just
once you found out there was an actor you liked in it, you were like, oh, okay, now I'll relent.
Exactly, and then you never brought it up again.
And we just need to. But yeah, I think that's an important thing. I think that is something that, and I say that, and then there's going to be a bunch of couples out there who do everything together, and that's their path to success. I think it really depends on the people.
Yeah.
And I think both of us are the sort that need our own space. So more than anything else, you got to make sure that you're, if that thing is matched, you're probably going to be good. But if one of us wanted to do every single thing together all the time and the other one didn't, it would be, we would probably still wouldn't be together.
No, that's too much. Well, and I think that leads to, that's a midlife crisis, right? Is when you're like, oh my gosh, I can't handle this much togetherness with this person.
Yeah.
I'm going to seek my own thing. Or vice versa. I don't do anything with this person and I don't feel closeness. And so I'm going to figure it out. So,
but the nice guy thing. Yeah. And I've to some degree in my life been that guy, some feeling like, having a female friend and feeling like we connect on this level and feeling like, I like her, she should like me, blah, 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 like back and forth. Yeah. And I do think I think you're right. It's great that they don't reward that.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a way, then, for a lot of reasons, this was kind of groundbreaking for 1987.
Yeah. I mean, a strong female lead that doesn't need a man and doesn't need a man. Like, presumably she's only been dating this guy for 3 months. So presumably she has been either in and out of relationships for 7 years or completely focused on herself for 7 years and finally got into a place where she can involve someone else in her life,
Yeah, but is not going to shut down her life.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, he's going to come to her.
Yeah, no, I think
she's going out of town and he's going to fly to see her.
Yeah. I relate to so much of Jane, by the way. When I first saw this 20 plus years ago, the part early in the movie where she's in a hotel for work and she's made a couple phone calls and then she unplugs the phone and she just allows herself like 30 seconds to cry. And then she just like, oh, okay, back.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing about that character.
It is very weird, but I really related to that.
Yeah, I get it. Like, someone like that who has to keep everything together and like her job is then keeping a bunch of people together. Like, I can relate to that because I don't want to come home at the end of the day and have to fix the router at my house because it's down or, to solve some wireless network issue here. So I can imagine like when her job is literally managing people all the time and managing expectations and her job doesn't stay at work. Yeah. But the one that gets me is when she's just on a dock crying.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
I think that's her, 8 a.m.
But where did she get she's in Washington, D.C. Where did she find a dock to cry on?
No, that was that we're in Nicaragua.
Oh, okay. Okay. You're right. You're right. Yeah. It was just weird. Cause I was thinking like, I'm looking at that and going like, okay, a crudely constructed dock. Oh, she's like back home and her dad's died or something. And we're going to this whole plot point. Like, nope, she just cried and then we were on to the next scene.
No, though I admire her restraint because once I start crying, like there is no stopping. And it may go on for a couple of hours.
Yeah, she's clearly like trained herself
which
on it.
Is kind of terrifying. But yeah, let it out, I say. And then you're good for another couple months.
Yeah. So before we get out of here, I just have to briefly play my other favorite thing from this movie.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I know what you're
which is there's a moment right after the triumph of Tom's first broadcast where a couple guys with mullets show up with skinny ties and sport jackets with the sleeves pushed up.
It's a very flock of seagulls.
And they're like, "We're here to play the new theme," and they play the new theme, and it's great. Let me see if I can cue it up here. Hopefully, we don't get a YouTube ad on this video. Now, let's see.
It starts off with this very high-tech syntho-sequency type thing, like this. That's the news. And the strings take the melody. Now there's the counter melody.
I got chills.
My first thought is that's so freaking long.
Yeah, it's just like such a weird bit to throw in.
Yeah,
and it's just, and you said these two guys are both like composers that work on film and television.
I
and
didn't.
stuff.
Well, yeah, we were watching this, and Dave said that has to be somebody, like
because they have this really brief scene, and I didn't think they were coming back, and I was like, that's probably just like two guys from a new wave band or something that they just wanted on the set because after the triumph, the head
like
guy or whatever
relief,
looks at them and goes, "Who are you?" And they go, "We're here to play the new theme."
Yeah,
and I thought that was it. I thought that was the bit because if that's the bit, that's also satisfying.
Yeah,
but it's so much better when they then just
it's great. Well, yeah, and in the credits they said theme writers or whatever. Mark Shaman, whose name I recognized, he's done scores for I don't know everything,
ton of stuff.
Yeah, and the other guy is also a composer. So yeah, that was probably he's done a lot of Shaman has done a lot of stuff for Rob Reiner movies, and this has a Rob Reiner feel to me. So I'm going to assume that there's some.
I think James L. Brooks has written some Rob Reiner stuff.
Yeah, there's it's all part of a spider web. So
yeah, it was great. Like I said earlier, what did I say was the most explicitly comedic part of the movie? I've forgotten already.
Oh, the sweating.
The sweating. But this might be a close number two.
It's pretty good. And that's on the soundtrack with their commentary is the big finish.
And number three would be when during the layoffs, they're laying off one guy and they step out of the office and he's like, I'm just old enough to take early retirement as a compliment, and they shake hands and he goes, the boss goes, "Is there? Just let me know if there's anything that I can do for you." And the guy getting laid off says, "Well, I certainly hope you'll die soon." Yeah, and then just leaves.
And it's great because the guy, so the boss was actually a reporter, and we've talked about this before. How when they bring a non-actor into a movie, sometimes you're like, "Oh, that was not a good choice." They really don't have, but he's very good at this because his role is to play a humorless.
Yeah, right.
Person, except for the point when Jack Nicholson is there, the Cronkite of this network, to oversee the layoffs, and he's like, "Oh, this is too bad. I really hate this." And the boss, the Paul is his name, is like, "Well, it could be less bad if you shaved a couple million off your salary." And Nicholson turns around and looks at him, and immediately Paul's like, "Oh no, I'm sorry. That was a terrible joke. Terrible joke. But yeah, of course, could happen. Yeah. Anyway, folks, we would love to know what you think about all of this, about the Joan Cusack of it all, about the love triangle, about the flop sweat, about journalistic ethics, about nice guys, whatever. Let us know what you think. You can drop us a line via email or on Facebook or Twitter. Our handle is the same for all three. It's ysmypodcast@gmail.com, or on Facebook or Twitter. We're not on Threads yet, for the time being.
Technically, we are. I actually got our
we?
name on Threads, but I haven't done anything with it. I got our name on Instagram, which I think translates to having it on Threads.
I think
I don't
it
know.
does.
I don't know
can't
yet.
keep track. I'm old. I've hit my limit for.
But it will
social
also be
media
YSMY
things.
podcast.
Oh, okay. Well, we're just YSMY podcast everywhere. So even MySpace.
All of the threes of people that follow us on Twitter should come over and follow us on Threads.
On Threads too. Yes. Anyway, also Facebook and Twitter, we post links to our latest episodes. We have new episodes every other Wednesday. So 2 weeks from today, no matter when you're listening, there'll be a new episode. You can find us on most of your major podcast providers. And in 2 weeks, our next episode, Dave will be hosting. What are you going to show me next time, Dave?
I think I've got like 2 weeks left, 2 episodes left of Big Dumb 90s movie summer or so.
You've got to get you through September 21st.
I know. So I'm saying that
end of summer.
That should be like 2 more episodes for me, right? Maybe 3.
I don't know. We'll have to map it out. You might have to pad.
So I'm starting to like think like, oh, okay, like what, because I've got way more than say 3 episodes. And we managed to do, we worked the Turtles in there. Like everything that I've done for the last like 3 months has been big, dumb, and 90s action, action adventure, slash adventure. So I'm like thinking really hard about what I should include, because obviously I can't ever show you a big 90s action movie outside of big 90s action movie summer.
No, it's not allowed.
So I decided, I think I'm going to go with something that's fun and big, like a popcorn movie, and is big and dumb and actiony and is from the 90s. Men in Black.
Oh yeah, I've never seen that. So it feels like a gap in my movie going.
Yes.
So
yes, the original Men in Black, and it should be good. And I've got a couple of others lined up, including what I would consider the quintessential big dumb 90s action movie. So you'll have to hang around to figure that one out in a few episodes.
Are there asteroids involved?
I'm not going to say.
Oh man, I hope there are asteroids involved.
Maybe.
Well, anyway, we'll see you in 2 weeks with Men in Black. In the meantime, this has been You Show Me Yours. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. The You Show Me Yours theme song is Uplifting Electronic Indie by Winnie the Moog from filmmusic.io. Hey, this is David Owen.
And this is Marian Cowagowan.
And this is You Show Me Yours, a podcast where a married couple talks about the music. The music? I don't think I've ever made that screw up before.
No, that's a first.
That gives me an idea, though. The music can make you listen to new metal.
I'm going to make you listen to Sarah McLachlan.
Great.
Every depressing album.
Bring it on.